So this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and it's nearly 3 years old, and I'm going to cover it here now to see if you should upgrade this coming next month or if you should just keep the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Let's find out. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max is going on 3 in just less than, well, just about a month here coming up. So we're not quite there, but I'm not gonna have time to cover this as we do get on with our comparisons against this phone later against the 17 Pro Max. But let's start with the very first thing, my battery health here. Now, I did stop using this when the iPhone 15 Pro Max came, and so mine basically stayed up there in the 100% range. So I can't really say that I've been using this phone heavily for 3 years. I mostly, after the fact, have been using it for speed test comparisons, camera comparisons, and just off and on. So I retained 100, but a lot of people are probably somewhere in the 80s or low 90s right now. So let me know your thoughts down below where your iPhone 14 Pro Max is at this current time. I want to talk about the very first thing though, and that is the design. Has the design held up? And when you take a look at it next to the 16 Pro Max, it's basically indistinguishable. For the average person just going to look at both these and say it's the same phone. So yes, the design is holding up fine, but that's likely going to change as Apple makes some bigger changes this year to the camera design and look. This phone will not only look different on the rear, it'll also look a little bit different on the front because it already has thinner bezels on the 16 Pro Max, and I think even the 15 Pro Max has a little bit thinner bezels than this phone. But the stainless steel is something I do kind of miss for just its hefty premium feel. Also, its shiny edges are nice, but they do pick up a lot of fingerprints, so I don't miss that whatsoever. I really hope they never bring that back. I'm not a fan of the shiny edges personally. The space black is beautiful, and you know, definitely on the back could look a little bit more like a dark gray, but the edges, camera itself definitely looks very nice overall. Now, for a key specification reminder, if you're not aware of this phone is rocking a 6.7-inch display here, so you do have a very large and enjoyable display on board. That is 1290 by 2796 pixels. We do have the first iPhone here that brought the 48 megapixel main sensor on board, so this is a pretty sharp sensor for sure. And that's one of the reasons why this is still a easy recommendation if you wanted to pick up an older iPhone Pro and you still want a good camera. This definitely still provides you that. However, it kind of caps out the zooming at 15 times. So that is its biggest downfall right now. This does have 6 gigabytes of RAM, which when the iPhone 17 Pros come out, that's going to actually feel pretty old because they're going to go all the way up to 12. Apple was really taking a while to get RAM increases, but they have no choice now. Now they got to start bumping the RAM, and we're going to see it here, and that's mostly due to AI. We are going to be seeing 12 gigs of RAM on the 17 Pro Max, so that's doubling over the 14 Pro Max. So that specification is definitely going to be dated here. Yes, you'll notice I'm on 18.4.1. I left it on my most recent version because I like to talk about how this phone still gets software updates in my review. I'm going to update it right after this video, but that's why it's there. Now, we do have ourselves an Apple A16 Bionic chipset on here, and this does have a 23 milliamp hour battery inside of the body. So that's a pretty sizable battery. This phone definitely can last a full day and then some, especially if you're not blasting the brightness and using GPS all day and using 4K video the whole time. And because of the dynamic island, the look on the front also doesn't look dated at all because they still have that on the newest iPhone up here, the dynamic island. So it's definitely staying pretty modern looking here for this phone. So that also looks just fine. The general look though definitely has held up for sure. So if you have a 14 Pro Max, you probably don't need to upgrade it just yet at all, unless you really want those new specification upgrades. Now, from a display perspective, we are looking at a pretty sharp panel here. We already mentioned the pixels earlier, but the actual text and everything is superb. This is an OLED display. It's very bright, it's very sharp, and honestly, if I read this and I read the 16 Pro Max, I'm getting the same tack sharpness on both phones. I also get that lovely true tone option on this phone as well, and pretty much all the other iPhones. So no matter what I'm reading, everything is going to look quite good. Also, because of its aspect ratio being a wider phone, this phone definitely tends to showcase quite a bit from edge to edge. So on this side to this side, it's wide enough to display a lot of content. And zooming in, everything is going to look good, except for when you kind of like get content mixed in with the dynamic island up there. You could see it up there on the top. You do get a little distracted with something like that. It is the ProMotion panel here. So when we go ahead and scroll, definitely a very smooth overall look to the phone, but some would argue that the iPhone experience in general doesn't look as smooth as some 120 hertz flagship Android phones. I still think this is a very smooth operating phone. Some people who had this since day one would probably tell you today it still feels like a new buttery smooth phone, even in 2025. So when we're talking about display, you just can't tell me that this is not a fantastic panel. It still is. It's very large at 6.7, and some people call this their maximum size that they're going to go to here is a 6.7 inch. You could see color reproduction is superb on pretty much all angles, and you just cannot go wrong. One thing I don't like about this or any other Max phone is, besides the picture-in-picture, which is a YouTube feature specifically, and also you can do that in things like the Netflix or some other video applications, the phone doesn't allow you to split screen on here, which is really weird for this size. In addition, you can't landscape this mode like older iPhone 8 Pluses could do. So that's been a point of contention I've had for basically all the Maxes. But other than that, it's a superb display still. Really could easily pass as a flagship right now, and even next month, it could still pass as a flagship display. That has been mature for a while. Now, when it comes to performance, this is just a casual game, but I'll just use it to discuss what I want to talk about here. The phone itself has been really good at performance. However, I do tend to feel a little bit more heat than I would like on this phone. That kind of goes for most of the Pro Maxes. This one is not quite as toasty as it didn't get quite as toasty as my 15 Pro Max, but with the case on, you really won't see it too much. The Apple A16 Bionic in here is not the most powerful chip anymore, but you really would be hard pressed to see a difference between this and the more current iPhone, even with the 6 gigabytes of RAM. The main issue though is that the RAM will not let you hold quite as many apps as the 8 gigs, and also it's not going to let you do Apple Intelligence on here. So no Apple Intelligence. Some people in the comments have been saying Apple what intelligence, because they know that the Android phones have better AI right now. But in the long haul, let's say a person was buying this now and the Apple Intelligence does improve, you have no support here. And that's very un-Apple-like to not have support on a phone that's not that old. So I was very irritated that the 14 Pro Max did not get Apple Intelligence. So if that is something that you want to use, it's definitely not going to be here. Also, if you want the newer Siri, that's also not here. So, that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to use those features that are on board, the rewrite tools and stuff, this is not the phone for you, for sure. You'll definitely want to upgrade this thing. So is the camera system still competitive here in 2025? And I would say not against flagships. I do think most flagship phones have gotten substantially better, mostly in terms of zoom lengths and also better ultra wide shots. This is not the 48 megapixel ultra wide. They also got newer iPhones got better 4K 120 spatial video options. So this phone right here, not competitive against flagship phones anymore, especially the top tier ones. However, it's still better than most mid-rangers, and it's going to be better than a lot of Android phones, a lot of them. Video is still very passable, and everything about this would still shoot a very great video that you would be very, very impressed with. So is it still a pro option? Yes. Does it beat some of the flagships like S25 Ultra, 16 Pro Max? Can't really compete with those anymore. No. So I would say upgrade this if you do want substantially better zoom and better camera this year. That is definitely something that this would be worth the upgrade. If you don't need some of those extra features and you're happy with the Pro cameras here, they do still very well. So you could keep it if you're not like needing those things or desiring those options. Then it's a easy keep here for the 14 Pro Max. Now, battery life here in 2025, this did have a large cell. It's really just going to come down to how much capacity you have. Because mine still has 100, I still easily last all day. For some of you out there who have been, hitting the battery harder and using the phone heavily, the device probably is somewhere in the 80s right now for you, or maybe low 90s. Let me know your thoughts or what you're experiencing down below. But those people will probably have a worse battery life than me because I have more capacity here. But generally, I think this is still a one-day phone, whereas 16 Pro Max is almost like 2. And the 13 Pro Max was a little better than this phone, but it's still got a max battery. So this phone is definitely, as long as you have a good health, this phone is still a good battery life to last throughout the day. But battery is something that they're likely going to make even bigger on the 17 Pro Max. So I would say upgrade it here. If battery is your primary top thing, this phone is not going to be it. But if battery has been fine for you, it's a keep. But if you want longer juice, this is going to be a good year to upgrade to 14 Pro Max. So iOS support and future updates. Now, I feel like this phone is kind of crippled now because it doesn't get the Apple Intelligence. Now, some people, again, will say, well, the so-called what Apple Intelligence, but at the same time, this is like a lighter version now of iOS because they're missing features that other phones that have 8 gigs of RAM do support. So the 14 Pro Max is definitely a little bit behind here when it comes to iOS support. Yes, it will get updates over the several years to come, maybe 2-3 years more, but they're not going to be with the latest features or RAM. So if software and future updates is a primary factor for you, the 14 Pro Max is behind, and it's definitely worth upgrading this year. You can also get a pretty good penny for this one if you sell it prior to the event, if you have a backup phone to hold you over. After the event, it might go down a little bit, but you'll still get a bit more money for this than like a 13 Pro Max or prior to that phone. Some of the things that still stand out for this phone: this does have emergency SOS, satellite via texting via satellite. This phone does have the 48 megapixel main sensor, which is a very sharp sensor. And some of the photos on here actually look sharper than what I see on the 15 Pro Max, which is very weird. So if that main sensor is king to you and you don't care about those other sensors being sharper, then this is going to be a really good option for you still here. The stainless steel body, the premium look to this, the heft to it really stands out still. Dynamic island is still fresh. We do have ourselves a silent switch, and we have the older lightning port. That is a big, I wouldn't say a big problem, but for the universality of the USB-C that is going on right now of products, this is just kind of feeling like a friction point for me on iPhone. So I definitely don't like lightning whatsoever anymore. And the current market value for this trade-in is probably somewhere around $400 to $600. So you can get a pretty penny off your 17 Pro Max should you decide to dump this one this year. So who should upgrade now? Well, I would probably skip the 16 Pro Max if you're coming from the 14 Pro Max at this point. You're only like a month away and you can get the 17 Pro Max. But who should upgrade is somebody who wants more zoom, a bigger screen, because it's likely going to get that. It's 6.9, longer, much longer battery life, Apple Intelligence, and they do want faster performance and better cooling system and thermals on their device. There's a lot of areas that are being upgraded this year. So for me, 3 years later, I would say it's definitely a go for the upgrade. However, I think someone who should keep it is going to be that person who's like, those features aren't going to drastically change my everyday. I'm waiting for something like the iPhone folding device. I'm waiting for Apple to go all in on maybe an all screen device. And they're just not impressed with the new look of what they've been seeing with the 17 Pro Max. If that's you, then keep this phone because it's still going to work fine. It's not like just because, the 17 Pro Max comes out and this doesn't have Apple Intelligence, it's going to stop working. No, it's going to still work great all the way through the next year. And it's still a premium phone that you already bought and paid for. So it would be just fine to keep it. But if those features I mentioned are of value to you, you are going to be pretty happy with that change. Anyway, that's my take. This was a great phone, but it wasn't the best iPhone they've ever launched. It still was a pretty nice product, and it brought some sweeping changes like dynamic island, 48 megapixel camera. It did bring the emergency SOS, some big changes that have carried over into today's iPhones. So if you found this video helpful, entertaining, informing, click the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you all in the very next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.